Hello everyone, welcome back to Cars and Kelley. Recently on my Miata, which for those of you who haven't seen my videos before is a 2000 Miata NB, I decided to do a full suspension swap just to replace, all the old tired components that have been around for 150,000 miles. And I figured, why not just go big or go home, do the full coilover swap as well as sway bars. So I ended up opting for a Flyin Miata Stage 2 coilover setup, which essentially comes with the shocks, the springs, the full kit for swapping out all four coilovers of the car, as well as the front and rear sway bar replacements. Sway bars and the coilovers are unrelated parts of the suspension. I mean, you could replace just the sway bars or just the coilovers, but they came in a nice kind of package deal from Flyin Miata to get both of them at the same time. So that's why I went with the Stage 2, as they called it, setup. So I actually only did this about last week, so this isn't my full review yet of the results of all that stuff, all those changes, but this is just kind of initial impressions and the changes that it made right off the bat to the car and the way it drives. So a brief overview of the installation, which was actually a bit more laborious than I intended. I'd looked up, a lot of videos, a lot of instructionals online about how to change Miata coilovers, because, it's been done millions of times. There's plenty of write-ups, plenty of videos on doing it, and, it seemed like it was going to be a decent amount of work, a day's work with a friend or so, but it shouldn't be anything that I couldn't handle, which was sort of true, but it took way longer than I thought. It was my first time doing it, so there's that, but still seemed like it took far longer than it needed to. As always, when working on cars, you encountered some issues that you don't see coming. You have to figure out how to get over them, and it just took a little more effort than we expected to try to overcome those obstacles. But, that being said, this isn't a video about the installation. If you want to see that, there's plenty other videos online about people doing Miata coilovers, so you can watch those if you want. But this is just about initially how it drives after all those changes. I sort of wanted to change the sway bars separately from the coilovers, like change one of them first and then see the difference, and then change the rest of it and see the difference, just to kind of see individually what those parts changed about the way it drives. But that's a little bit impractical because you have the car up in the air already. To change something, I figure you might as well do everything, because I have limited time to work on this car as is, so it made sense to just kind of do it all in one go. For the reason this isn't a full review yet, even though these have already been on for about a week, is coilovers, or any sort of spring replacement for suspension in general, tends to settle over a few week period. They have to kind of break in, and the ride height has to adjust naturally to what it will for the rest of the duration of the springs. The advantage of coilovers obviously being adjustable ride height, so after that few week break-in period, I'll be able to go back in and readjust all the heights of the four corners to my liking, but for now it's sort of not the final settings. The height in the front is kind of tucked nicely over about a week. There's not much gap here. I might lower it a little bit more just to see how it looks after the few weeks are over. But the rear, definitely, there's still a pretty big gap here, especially on the left side of the car, that I'll definitely want to lower this rear of the car a little more. Another thing I'll want to do after everything's all said and done with my own adjustments is go get a professional alignment from a shop. Flyin Miata sent some specifications that they recommend for alignment settings after the break-in period, so I'll be doing that too, which I'm sure will also change the way it drives. But in the meantime, even just initially installing it, not doing too much of tweaking myself with the settings, I can already tell a vast improvement in terms of the way the car handles. I think honestly a lot of it is due to the sway bars and not just the coilovers, because sway bars are known for affecting the way the car transfers its weight in terms of corner turn in and response, changing direction with the car, kind of sharp, precise turn in from the front rather than sort of sloppy as it was before. So that's the biggest difference I've noticed with I think the sway bars, particularly the front one, because it's a big beefy thick sway bar. It's quite strong, so it really helps a lot with that precise turn in. You notice that a lot through tight turns at speed. The car just shifts its weight from side to side a lot better than it does before. It kind of seems a lot more composed through tighter sections. Sure, some of that is obviously due to the completely new suspension as well, but I think the biggest thing I've noticed from the coilovers has been the ride comfort over smooth roads, especially like on the freeway. My old suspension on the freeway kind of used to bump around a little bit of vibration through the steering wheel. Wasn't that great for a long distance on the freeway. This is by no means like suddenly a luxury car with smooth suspension, because it's actually the opposite, because these are stiffer springs than they were before, so it's a sportier ride, sort of a harsher ride in some sense. But on the freeway, when you're kind of just cruising along at one speed, there aren't really any imbalances in this new suspension, and it kind of just feels a lot more tight and less vibration overall over smooth roads. That being said, over bumpier roads or less ideal conditions, you definitely notice the stiffness of these springs, and it does not ride particularly comfortably. But you know, you don't expect that getting coilovers. You get it for the sporty feeling. I'll be interested to see after lowering the car's ride height a little bit more, if that actually affects it even more in terms of the way it drives. Mostly, I think, you know, fine adjustments in the ride height affect a lot how it looks. The way the car sits on the road is really the main thing that changes, but I am curious to see like another maybe inch or so drop in the back or a little more in the front, how that'll affect the way it drives too. Just a note about fitment in terms of wheel fitment with the suspension. I am running 15x8 plus 25 wheels right now. I have a separate video about my wheel and tire setup you can watch if you'd like, but when I installed those wheels and tires before, you know, with the stock suspension, I did roll the fenders a little bit, just kind of a slight fender tuck in here, not really a pull at all, but just a slight roll in the front and back, and I wasn't even sure if that was necessary, and I just wanted to do that as a precautionary step, just in case the wheels decided to rub, because, you know, 15x8 plus 25 with the 205 tire is considerably wider than stock, so I just wanted to give myself some room in case it decided to rub. So I have not rolled it anymore since then for the new suspension, and maybe when I lower the car even more, I might have to roll it a little bit more. I'm not sure, but definitely keep in mind if you're running not stock wheels or like a wider setup, also with coilovers or lowered suspension, you will probably have to considerably roll the fenders. I'm absolutely loving the way the car looks, the low stance it has. You know, still has sort of a monster truck sized gap in the back, so that'll have to go. But at least in the front, it looks really tucked, looks really good from pretty much any angle. Any potential downsides I see with this setup like this, or really any kind of lowered car, obviously you're gonna have some clearance issues in the front with like speed bumps or kind of getting into driveways and stuff. I have this aftermarket front lip on here, which already makes it a little lower in the front. So I already, before this lowered suspension, had a couple times where I've scraped the front going into a steep driveway or something. So that's going to be even more of an issue now. And then obviously, you know, on really bumpy roads, this is going to ride even less comfortably than before. So those are kind of all the obvious and only downsides pretty much to a suspension setup like this, because the average customer buying coilovers like this knows that it's going to be stiffer and that it's going to handle better, and that's why you're getting it, and you're kind of willing to sacrifice some of that comfort for that. But still, you might as well say that is definitely a downside you have to consider. And overall, those are my first impressions. Really impressed with how the car handles, you know, wide sweeping turns. Feels very composed like the whole way through. There's no vagueness through the suspension mid-corner or anything. It's pretty, the turn-in is much more precise, and it feels a lot sharper throughout the whole turn. I think the biggest and most pleasant difference is definitely the sway bars, the way that they help the car change direction really quickly. There's not much lag or kind of latency at all between when you turn the wheel and when you feel the front wheels kind of respond and turn into a corner. Definitely a big improvement, much needed. So I think that's it for now. I'm definitely keep you guys posted about how it feels after a few more weeks, after I lower it, after I get the alignment. I'll definitely be making like a full review, like a point of view drive with the whole new setup tuned and exactly how I want to see how it drives in the end. Well, I think that's it for now. I'm super excited to see how this suspension setup will play out, how it'll handle in the end, so I'll definitely have a full review coming up soon. But until then, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.